The G Wade Podcast with Deacon Dirty.
Now let's back up a little bit.
Yes.
Like I said, you lived in D.C., but before that, if I'm not mistaken, if I understand it correctly, you were adopted or something to that, into a nunnery or something like that?
Into a nunnery, brother. I was adopted into a nunnery. In fact, I think that's why I have some spiritual leanings. I've always been attached to the church in some way. But for me, when I was adopted, it was at a very early age. I was actually, once my parents gave me up, I was placed directly into a nunnery, and that's where me. So my mom said that she chose me because out of all the kids, I winked at her, and that's how she knew I was the right one. So
okay. That, or you knew you was gonna be a love coach later on in life.
Oh, now you're like, come on with it. See,
Right.
Get the right one. Get the right one.
Get the right one. You know what I'm saying? That's what's up. And so, you are a former. I don't know if I want to say ex, so I'll say you're a former pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And how does a pastor become a love coach? Now I know we talk about in church. We talk about the love of God.
Yes.
The love of Jesus.
Yes.
But you rarely hear the love of self or relationships.
Yeah, a lot of that honestly is because the church does a great job of making sure you're very dependent on the leadership. So if you love yourself too much, they feel like you may not need the church. So it's pretty good to keep you in a state where you're constantly needing more prayers, more self-esteem, more self-confidence, and you get that from the church, and that's the only source that you get it from. But the reason why I'm a love coach is because I feel like every pastor is really supposed to be a love coach. Every pastor is really supposed to help you connect those three ways I mentioned about upwardly, inwardly, and outwardly.
Right.
And I feel like we do an excellent job in the church of connecting upwardly, but not such an amazing job, if at all, connecting outwardly or inwardly. And so you end up having people who have bad relationships, even in the church. You have people who really don't love themselves, even though they have titles and positions and everything else. They're having to go to the altar every time they go to church because there's this self-love lack that's within them. And so my job as a love coach is to help people do all three. Again, I feel like the church is supposed to do that anyway, but I'm definitely using my calling to really help people in this way.
Okay. Now, what was the call to the church? How did you get that calling to become pastor?
Yeah, well, when I was growing up, man, I was heavy in the church. When we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, my aunt and uncle were playing for the church, one of the churches, and I was the kid that was like, "Mom, let's go to church." Like I was that type of kid. So we went to the church. I got really involved. I was a youth choir president, youth ministry president. I started. I was actually licensed as a minister at that particular church. And when I went to college, I started leading 3 different churches, college programs. And from there, I became ordained through a non-denominational church up in D.C. And I went to seminary. And ever since, just been doing that work. But when I stepped away, it was really because I was in my office and having too many one-on-ones with people saying things that I couldn't say in the pulpit. And I realized that the walls of church just weren't big enough in order to really hold the reality of what's going on. I tell people, man, the church is always at least a decade behind the times. It's always at least a decade behind, and it does that intentionally because it's got to have some energy in order to be relevant. So for me, I said I wanted to be where people are when they are. And I realized that it was necessary for me to step away to do that.
Now, but what was that thing? Because you're saying the things that you could not say from the pulpit. Was it because they were too personal? Was it because it was too? I guess it would divide the church. What was the thing that said I can't say this stuff? You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Let me tell you something. There are so many things that you can't say in a pulpit that you can say behind the scenes, and the same people hearing it will react 2 different ways. It's normally proven that people are more conservative in groups than they are one-on-one, right? So people will have a more conservative leaning in a group, in groupthink, than they will in one-on-one. So for me, anything in regards to divorce, in regards to sexuality, in regards to sexual preferences, you couldn't talk about how to keep your man or how to keep your woman doing things that are sexual at all. You couldn't talk about really dating multiple people because you wanted to figure out what you really wanted. It was that thought that you had to really pray, and the one that comes must be the one. and you got to name them and claim them and tag it and mag it and all that kind of stuff, So it was so funny. I remember growing up and having 3 different girls saying that God told me that I was their husband.
Isn't that crazy?
And I was like, well, I don't think God operates in confusion like that, because I don't think I'm supposed to have 3 wives. So, but that was what they were taught, is that if I see something I like, then it has to be the one.
Go for it.
It has to be it. It can't just be someone that I'm interested in and let me figure out why, to figure out more about me and my preferences. It has to be, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of people in church who are in tragic relationships that are keeping up appearances for the sake of they made a decision, now they're stuck. And I know that I can't even say that in over the pulpit. Even though you can't say there, and they'll be right in that office right afterwards and counselor. Hello.
They can't say, you can't say look at your neighbor and say
can't look at your neighbor and say you might not be the one.
You might not be the one. That's right. That's funny, bro, because there's the memes that always float around when it says, church girls and Christian girls be like, and the guy be like, hey, let's go on a date. And the next scene, she's in a wedding dress. You know what I mean?
Oh, really? That is the truth. But that's how it's almost straight. It's almost, if you look at, it's funny, but if you look at those movies where you have the cults that are out in the woods, on plantations or farms, and the head cult master will marry many of the girls. It's much of that, it's like he chose you, so that's the one you get, and that's how it will be. And that's still a thinking, a real substantial thinking in the church, which is honestly hurting so many relationships. I say this all the time. I say if the church thought on relationships was so amazing, and most Black women are going to church, then there should be amazing relationships everywhere, but there aren't. So clearly something's not right.
But do you think it's that way because generally there's, in terms of ratio, there's always 27 to 1? You know what I'm saying? It's always so many women to one man, so everybody's clamoring. You know what I mean?
I think there's a number of factors. I think that's one of them, though. I do think that there are more women in church. I think that is part of the reason that men don't go to church. That's one of the reasons men don't go to church, is that when they go, they're bombarded with really, a lot of men would go for the fact of actually trying to find religion, like trying to find a spiritual practice, wanting to feel like they're tied into something, and not wanting to feel like they immediately have to go into a leadership role, or they immediately have to be searched after by, especially if they're a single man, the usher, a church mother coming up, baby, why you not married yet, or why you ain't got no girlfriend, asking questions like that. True. So a lot of men get run off from the church because of that one thing or another. So that's number one why a lot of men don't go. It just isn't conducive. Honestly, it's because of the emotionalism of church. Most men don't like going. They feel like it's overly emotional. Like most men come for context, for information, and for upgrading, right? That's what men like. We like a good upgrade. So we want to upgrade in our lives. But when it comes to church, it feels like super overly emotional, but it appeals to more women.
You know what? I agree with that. I actually do agree with that. And also with the the pressures of the you my husband thing. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that, every church I stepped in that, I'm somebody's husband, but I am simply saying I understand. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, brother.
Right.